They say that her books have sold more copies than the Bible. Some preteens that are probably way too young to be reading books about sexual violence and domestic abuse probably say her books are the Bible. But what exactly is Miss Hoover doing to attract so many young readers? How is she doing it? Why does she have such a cult following? Does she have a positive influence? And what on earth is up with all the trauma-based writing? Okay, welcome to my little video essay on Colleen Hoover. If you are a fan of Colleen Hoover, you might not want to watch this, or maybe do, to gain some perspective. I will be talking about some positives and some negatives of Colleen Hoover. So I've tried to make a balanced argument, but I do end up swaying towards the negatives. To make this fair, let's delve into some background information about Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover was born and raised in Texas. She was a teacher as well as a social worker before she was an author. If you don't know who Colleen Hoover is and what on earth she does, the best way to describe it is she is most famous for her romantic thrillers and young adult fiction, but as Hoover herself says, "I don't like to be confined to one genre. If you put me in a box, I'll claw my way out." And so each new book is filled with surprises, and surprises indeed. As Jeanette McKellar says, in Hoover's work, women are illustrated as passive objects, only able to derive agency when their male counterpart chooses them. And her stories feature romanticization of toxic masculinity, unhealthy codependent relationships, and abusive controlling behavior. A little bit of a problematic soup we've got going on, particularly in her novel November 9th. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of the context of that novel, but I'll pop it up on screen here. Some more key background information. Because her novels are largely about abuse and abusive situations, Hoover has actually been open about her personal connection to some of the things she writes about. So Hoover has said that her father physically abused her mother, and has said that It Ends With Us, which is again one of her probably most popular novels, was inspired by what her mother went through. And to be honest, I don't really have the mental strength to discuss what her son is facing as allegations. So of course it would not be fair to dive into discussing her and her novels without addressing the beneficial aspect. There's so much violence against women in the world that it's natural for readers to seek out the same thing in fiction. Some experts say 41% of women have experienced sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by a partner. And in the UK, a recent July 2023 government report stated peer-on-peer sexual harassment was commonplace in schools and that sexist language, behaviours and attitudes persisted unchallenged. Some 9 in 10 girls and half of the boys told Ofsted that they or their peers were regularly exposed to unwanted explicit images or videos. Most girls and boys, 92% and 74% respectively, told inspectors that sexist name-calling was frequent. Children were not telling teachers and other adults about their experiences because such behaviour had become normal. Ofsted concluded that school leaders should assume they had a problem with sexual harassment and sexual abuse, even with no reported incidents. That is not surprising, but shocking nonetheless. Now I can tell you for free that there are plenty of ways of drawing a reader in without having to bring up unresolved toxic masculinity and demonstrating unhealthy relationships without actually addressing how problematic they are. So why does Hoover resort to romanticizing them? And why does she seem to really adhere to the structures of toxic masculinity for any types of substance in her plots? So this is a quote from November 9th. "I hold her tight, hoping if she feels how much I need her to stay with me that she'll change her mind. But she doesn't. She releases me and opens the door to the cab. I've never wanted to use physical force on a girl before, but I want to push her to the ground and hold her there until the cab drives away." Now, there are plenty of examples. One of them is also how weird and obsessed the male character in this story is with the female's scars and the hyperfixation on kind of fetishizing them in a way. It is honestly really disturbing. And of course, I know what you may be saying, as many of her fans point out, it is a fiction book. Her books aren't manuals or guidebooks on how to form healthy relationships. But Ms. Girl, know your audience, know your readers, and certainly do not discuss abusive relationships without discussing how harmful they are. There is absolutely no need to glorify them. The danger is further emphasized by her influence on TikTok, with the popular hashtag booktok community often promoting her books as YA romance genre. In addition, TikTok is already filled with videos romanticizing toxic relationships and wrongfully portraying them as filled with passion and amounts of lust. I realise that I'm not quite delving into the discussion regarding her actual writing style, but I do think it's crucial to discuss her choice of plots. And it's not a particularly nuanced one at that. There are plenty of people out there who would agree with me on criticising her chosen book plot. With a world of hyper-consumerism and social media, it is extremely difficult not to fall into its claws. And so, reading books is no longer focused on sole enjoyment, but rather on the amount of books you can read within a 24-hour day. How many books you read a month, what your yearly goals are. Hence, it's not surprising when an author that writes simple, dialogue-heavy books blows up and takes over TikTok. I know you may think that Hoover herself, despite her problematic books, is not necessarily someone to worry about, but I believe it opens up a larger conversation. I used to believe we were miles past accepting toxic masculinity culture and violence against women and girls, but clearly not, because the statistics speak for themselves. The romance book genre is at large consumed by women. Why is it that as women we support authors who don't shine a light on how damaging this behaviour is and how it actually furthers gender inequality? Why are we allowing preteens and teens, aka our next generation, to stroll into Waterstones and purchase a book that all their friends have recommended and raved on about for it to be subpar quality, problematic at best, and a terrible introduction into intimate relationships? But with all this said, I cannot dispute that Colleen Hoover has single-handedly led a lot of the female younger generation back into reading. For most, it starts with a Colleen Hoover book, continues to Sarah J. Maas, R.F. Kuang, Mieko Kawakami, Hanyo Yanagihara, Sally Rooney, Stephen King, and many more. My worry is for the damage done beforehand, for the impressions made on younger girls and women about relationships. Can we be done with defining masculinity in such an outdated and harmful way? Because what Hoover may not realise is that her books are harming her wider readership of women, but also perpetuating toxic masculinity at its finest. And it's great to acknowledge it and include it in books, especially as it's often quite a taboo subject to discuss. But it must be presented with examples of healthy masculinity and healthy relationships. You cannot have one without the other, for all you are doing is reinforcing already existing societal structures that oppress women and men, inhibiting them from being a true free individual. It wouldn't be a far reach to also conclude that Colleen Hoover is responsible for an uptake in reading as a hobby, while simultaneously encouraging young girls to seek violence for true, passionate love. So with all this said, I'm not too sure what the solution is. I have a very clear opinion on her books, but it does raise an even larger question of book buying and the need for ID, for age restrictions. Should you require a form of ID to purchase her books? And others alike? Should it be 16 plus or 18 plus? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and let me know if you've read any of her books and what your opinions are. I've got a couple of them here. November 9th is deep down in my stack of books, but I have read a good arrangement of them. They are very fast-paced books. My biggest worry is the fact that a lot of young readers are hooked on these books, and the impressions that they leave are not of a healthy relationship, but of very, very toxic love. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoy making video essays, so I'll be making a lot more. I've also been reading, I kind of wrote like a little script, so I've been reading that off of my laptop. So please excuse if my eyes are kind of shifting from one to the other. This was a little bit of a quicker video, but I would love to delve into lots of other topics that I'm very passionate about, linked to politics, linked to feminism, linked to books. So please let me know if you want to see more of that below, and thank you. Please subscribe, like, and comment.